Greetings and salivations, and welcome to another exciting episode of Knife Time Story. Today we're going to be continuing the conversation about the Slim Heritage Elite line, the Buck 110 and the Buck 112. I've had these guys for a month. Been playing with them a whole lot, using them for all kinds of tasks. Let's see how they stack up against the traditional Buck 110 with none of the bells and whistles, 420 HC steel. That particular 110 is not old, but it is trusty. It is brand new, and there's a reason for that. So let's have some fun here. I have received a lot of comments on this video that I did about these two knives. And a lot of you have received yours, and I would say 98% of the people who have received their knife have been happy. Sadly, there have been a couple not so perfect versions that have made it into the hands of customers. Let's start with the 110. I got the one with nickel silver. If you didn't know, nickel silver is a little stronger, a little tougher, a little more durable, all those good words, than brass. But, you know, I look at this and it just seems so darn fancy. I wish it was brass. The 112, as you can see, has taken on a bit of a patina. And for those of you who are paying attention, you may have noticed something was missing from this 112. The other day I was in Walmart, and I went to the sporting goods counter, and they happened to have a Buck 110. And I asked the young fellow behind the counter, can I see that? And he got it out. It was pretty darn good looking. Everything looked good on it. All the parameters that I'd address in this video, which you have to watch if you're going to be buying a garden variety Buck 110. I then proceeded to ask him, how many of these do you have in stock? He looked at his little machine, his little app, and said, we have 4. I said, okay, let's see them. And then I saw all the different people behind me, and that this guy was not the sharpest knife in the box. I thought, let's just buy all 4, and I'll pick the best one and return the other 3. That's not unheard of. It saves everybody else standing around waiting to get their fishing license or whatever the case may be. It saves them the time of having to stand there and watch some guy who's super anal retentive about his Buck 110s standing there going, oh, well, I think that's about 2 degrees off to the left. Somebody would use one of those 110s and probably kill me. Turns out there was only one other Buck 110, so that narrowed my choices down to 2. Gave me the knife, which is this one, and I looked at it and I went, well, holy crap, look at that. The hafting is 99% perfect. That's 99% perfect. Actually, that's 100% perfect. The butt, perfect. The blade grind was perfectly symmetrical. The plunge lines, perfectly symmetrical. The kick, which is that part, that's the part that you hear slap against the spring on the inside that protects right about there from hitting anything on the inside. So that's why, you know, if you have to let your blade slap, I guess you have to. But the best thing to do is just always kind of help it close. So everything about this was perfectamento. So I said, I'll take it. Why would I do this? These are $90 plus tax. It came to $98. Is this a $100 knife? We've already talked about that. I did a video about it. I'm not going to address it, but 2 beautifully matched ebony scales. And when I look at all of the surfaces for the polishing and all that good stuff, even these rivets are nice and domed. Some care and attention went into the construction of this knife and the final finishing. Just like every other Buck 110 that you get, garden variety, because it didn't apply to these guys. They came in really clean. This was filthy. There's polishing compound within the grain of the wood. There's so much polishing compound inside there and inside the pivot, all over the place. It took a good hour of bathing it in WD-40, spraying it down into the groove there, working it a little bit, letting stuff slough out, re-washing it, re-wiping it, and wash, rinse, repeat for about an hour. And it finally got the last bits of the crap out of there. A lot of people don't do that, and they don't care. Bravo for you. But I'm not like that. I'm not wired that way. So I like this knife to be clean as a whistle and sound beautifully when you open it and close it. I double checked. The marking on the blade is 2026. The box, which is conveniently located up there. Why did I get that? Always buy them in a box. Don't buy the blister pack. Genuine ebony hardwood handle, and it has the date code on here, 2/24/26. So this is a 2026 version. The reason why I thought I'm just going to suck it up, I'm going to buy a $98 version of the garden variety, is to see if Buck has changed the manufacturing processes for this one to more kind of align with this one. Now, they can't go through the same grinders and all that stuff because this is 420HC, this is MagnaCut. This takes a different kind of grinding wheel and abrasive and all that good stuff than this does. These are Rockweld between 62 and 64. According to Buck, they're coming in at 63 very consistently, which is good. These might be 57, 58, so a whole lot different and are a lot easier to grind. But I've noticed that some of the other things look a lot more refined than they have in the past. Even in there, that's nice and smooth and even with no grind lines, no hiccups. Looks like they've been polishing that pivot. Same thing with this knife. However, the process is different because this is perfectly flat. This is slightly rounded. So it is two different production lines. Actually, I think that's a good thing. Keep them separate. When I say I have put these three knives to the test and done a lot of work, I'm not kidding around. Kitchen work, out in the yard work, just carrying around work, cutting up cardboard, remodeling the office. You didn't notice my lovely brick wall, the accented lighting? I mean, come on. This is no hobo operation. This is a very serious production going on here. Apples to apples, the Buck 110 and the Buck 110 Slimline. For the tasks that you would want to do with a knife this size, especially a blade this size, for instance, I had to do a lot of trimming on a door frame in this building for my new entrance. Rather than using a plane or anything like that, which would have taken forever, or a rasp, I used knives, and it worked great. It was actually a lot of fun, and I got to experiment with a bunch of different knives. This knife, being thin, started to be uncomfortable. The blade was splendid. Kept cutting, no problem, going through old paint. I'm sure a lot of that was lead paint, which I made sure I took deep breaths or chewed on the paint chips. I can see why some of you are saying, gosh, that's kind of thin. I like the girth of the regular 110. I'm kind of in that same camp now. I like a little bit more girth in my hand. Let's be realistic. Let's say that this is half the thickness of this. Over a long period of time, that's a significant amount. And I used this on the door frame and found that I had less hand fatigue and was able to control the knife longer, doing more work. So points for the garden variety. I keep calling it that, but it's the one you can get anywhere. Nothing really special about it. Old standby, $110 that they make one of every 15 minutes. So in that case, this, I don't want to poo-poo it for shorter tasks, maybe some light kitchen work, that kind of thing. This is great. I don't know that I would want to field dress a large animal with it, even though it's MagnaCut, and that will definitely hold up longer. This feels like a true handle. No hot spots, nicely rounded, very contoured, feels great in my hand. You know, they knocked the sharp edges off of these, but they're really finished more like the old Buck 110s from the 70s, where it was just, you know, not as refined and rounded like that. So that's the 110. The 112, I enjoyed using it on the door frame. I've done a lot of other projects. I've whittled with it. I started making a spoon with it. I have cut a bunch of cardboard with it and have yet to have to touch up in any way, shape, or form the MagnaCut blade. That, you know, that is great. I like the size of this knife and the feel. And for the smaller package, it's okay for it to be thin, because you're not going to be doing the super heavy jobs. You figure when you're doing stuff, this blade is this much further away from your hand than this blade. You're a little bit more choked up and right on top of that blade, and the fact that this isn't rounded like this doesn't really come into play. But what I found was I preferred this knife without the pocket clip in my hand when I was doing long-term tasks, and I liked how it just falls into a back pocket and is gone. You forget it's there. I do like the way the brass is taking on a nice patina. For whatever reason, I enjoy that. I do like this MagnaCut. I do have one small gripe about the garden variety version that comes with the leather sheath that's made in Mexico. I was disappointed to not see a piece of fabric disc in here protecting the knife from the backside of this snap. For some of you, you might say, what is the big deal? Well, and these are beautiful ebony scales. You put that knife in the sheath the proper way, and then you go to close this, you're forcing the back of that snap into your ebony. Over time, you're going to give yourself a nice little round mark. So, as usual, I took it upon myself to use a very thin felt self-stick sticker line it right up there on the, and squish it down, and that protects this knife. For $90+, you know, tell those folks in Mexico, put the felt discs back in there. So this is actually the sheath that I carry this in. I happen to like that logo. That's where I stand. This has become a pocket knife, so the clip is gone. I didn't throw it away, but I like this as a pocket knife. I still carry this around for general, everyday kind of tasks. I still wind up carrying this one the most, which leads me to, and I'm not going to talk about it this video, it's going to be another video about knife laws where I live, and if I was to follow them to the absolute letter, which knife would I carry? So look forward to that someday in the future. You know, I mentioned I remodeled the office. Yes, I did. Let's just say carpentry and remodeling and that sort of thing really isn't my forte, but it helps to have a good tool. And the kind folks at Lexavon sent me this tape measure. What makes this tape measure cool? Well, how about the fact that it has a laser? Ooh, look at that. Laser beam. So what does that do for me? Well, it measures things that I can't reach. I have a wall over there. I wanted to make that whole wall brick. How much do I have to buy? I have book cabinets that I don't want to move. There's stuff on them. So I had to measure down that wall. I'll show you how I did it. I can't reach in there. So, what do? You put the tape measure against this wall, you aim the laser beam down there, and you have your measurement. So the laser's activated, but right now, it's right there. I need to move it to get into there. Push the button. And it is 10 feet 4 inches. What's cool is it measures from the back of the tape measure, which is handy because that means it's already taking into account the 3 3/8 inches that this takes up. So 10 feet 4 inches. I knew exactly how much material I needed to buy. And I could do the same thing for the wall I was painting and then where my little office goes and all that good stuff. Very, very handy. I look forward to using this out in the woods, though I do hope that the tree canopy is enough to make it dark enough so I can see the laser. Otherwise, I have a tape measure and it's up to 16 feet, 130 feet with the laser. Great little addition to the toolbox. That's a wrap. I'm done. Thanks for watching. See you next time.